Welcome to the Women Living Well After 50 podcast. I'm Karen Chaston and I'm passionate about inspiring, motivating, supporting and informing women over 50 to embrace this exciting time of life. Health and wellness in mind, body and spirit are the foundations for living well, but there is so much more to a life well lived. Each week, through conversations with my guests, I'll be presenting topics that will help us all to live well and enjoy life. So join me as we discover new ways to become women living well after 50. Are you ready to start living? What are you waiting for? Let's get started. Welcome to Conversations with Women Living Well After 50. I'm Karen Chaston and it's lovely to have you join me for another episode. Today's topic, we're going to be talking about loss and grief. Now, loss is part of life and we've all experienced it at some point in our life and we will in the future as well. But how we cope with loss and grief is a very personal experience, and some cope better than others, and we all cope in our own way. For the last 6 months, we've all been coping with COVID-19, and with that has brought loss in many ways. There's been the physical loss of those that has lost loved ones to the virus. There's been the financial loss and loss of employment for those who've lost their jobs, and this has affected their future. So there's that loss. There's been the loss of connecting with others. We haven't been able to go out physically, so we've had the loss of our freedom. And we've had to make do with technology to stay in touch with family and friends. And that has brought the loss of physical connection as well, because there's nothing like giving a hug to your family and friends, is there? So we've all experienced loss in some way over the last 6 months, and many of us are still trying to come to terms with it and to deal with it in our everyday life, and I'm sure it will take some time. My guest today is Karen Chaston, a business owner, Beyond Loss mentor, and an international keynote speaker who has shared the stage with Marianne Williamson, Jamie Lee Curtis, Valerie Harper and Dr. Ellie Drake. She's the author of 8 books and numerous ebooks, as well as being an online TV show host and a podcaster. Karen's career was as a chief financial officer for a publicly listed company, and she was in senior management roles for over 25 years. But all this changed for Karen back in July 2011. When her 27-year-old son, Dan, passed away unexpectedly and suddenly at her own back door. Can you imagine that? Within 15 months, Karen had resigned from her role as CFO and began a personal, professional and spiritual journey that would culminate in her becoming a Beyond Loss expert and co-founding her business, Live Love by Design. Karen's first-hand experience has helped her develop the Beyond Loss retreats and programs. And in these, she demonstrates that loss has a correlation with all areas of our lives. Karen believes that when individuals embrace these concepts, we can easily move past the loss and create a better life for ourselves every day. When companies embrace these concepts, they can unlock the people and profits connection. Karen lives on the Gold Coast in Australia, and her motto is, life is too short to be suffering from loss. So unwrap the gift that this has brought and then design a life that you live and love. So let's go and join the conversation. Welcome, Karen, and I'm just so grateful to have you join me today in conversation to share your story and the wonderful work that you do. I looked at your website and saw your powerful video where you share what happened to you, and it's just so emotional and powerful that I'm going to put a link to that in the comments because I was really touched with that. So welcome today.
Thank you, Sue. It's so good to be here.
Now, I want to start with your journey. In my introduction, I shared the unexpected loss of your beloved son, Dan, back in 2011. As a mother myself, I just can't imagine what that experience was like. And I wonder if you would be able to share with us what happened and how it changed you and the path that you were on for life.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Sue. Yeah, no one expects to lose, a child. We always expect to pass in the order of our birth. We sort of seem that seems to be the right way to do it. But unfortunately, none of us have an expiry date on our birth certificate. And in some ways, it sort of, when you realise that, it sort of makes you go, maybe I should be living and loving my life, a lot more than what I do. So what happened was back in 2011, July 2011, my husband and I woke up on the 10th of July, it was a Sunday morning, thinking that we were going to have a lazy day at home. So within 15 minutes, we were looking at our youngest son, Dan, lying at our back door in the fetal position with saliva coming out of his mouth. And we thought he was unconscious. We thought he was alive because obviously he had saliva coming out of his mouth. So we sort of thought that was a good sign. But we called the paramedics and, they got there really quickly and they just took one look at him and they just it literally looked like they went and then straight back to me. And I'm going, no, go back. You haven't even looked at him. And they said, look, he's been dead for several hours. The blood had pooled sort of, in his lower back and all that sort of stuff. So we thought a healthy 27-year-old had gone out the night before. But we found out, and it took us a while to find out, like the next day at the autopsy, we found out that he had lungs that were so bad that if he had smoked full on for like 10, 15 years, which he hadn't, he was a social smoker, he couldn't have done a quarter of the damage to the lungs. He had pneumonia a couple of years earlier when he'd been in Scotland and he'd spent a week in hospital. So I don't know if he came from that. Dan's a twin. He's, our youngest child by a minute. Josh is his twin and he also has an older brother, Ben. And it's just the last thing that you expect. And we, and me at that time, believe it or not, you wouldn't think so looking at me now, I was a CFO of a publicly listed company and very busy all the time, as you can imagine. Actually too busy. I now refer to those days as me living in a Groundhog Day days. Every day just sort of was exactly the same as the day before. And I literally went straight back to work the day after his funeral. I just avoided it. I did all the cliches that I now tell people not to do. And it's so funny. Everything I advise people to do, it's the complete opposite to what I do. So it's sort of from experience. Don't do what I did. It'll take you, a lot longer to get over it. So I literally went straight back to work, eating more, drinking more, and working even harder just to, I guess, avoid, to be quite honest. I was in avoidance. And it's ridiculous. The things that we do, but none of us have been taught what to do when loss comes.
No.
And it's painful. And we just do all these avoidance strategies so it's not so painful.
And I think too, as we said, you don't expect your child. You don't expect to lose your child. So not only are you dealing with your loss and grief, which, if a loved one passes away, well, we all go through that. But this is something that shouldn't be happening. And it is. So I can understand where you just want to put your head in the sand with that and just go back to hiding behind what you would try to have a normal life and just not wanting to accept it. So, it must have been just so difficult. But after your loss, you started Live Life Live Love by Design. And you say you're a co-founder with Dan. And I think that's just so touching and such a lovely way to keep his spirit alive. So by creating this company, how does this help? And what do you actually do? What's Live Love by Design all about?
Okay. So, as I said, I went straight back to work, right? And I now know that I was meant to have woken up after Dan's passing. And because I didn't, I had to have another loss event come into my life, which came in the form of me having to choose. And I chose redundancy when the company I was working for merged with another. So after that sort of process, I just stopped and I thought, what's going on? You know, like Dan passed, I just went straight back to work. Now I've been made redundant. Sure, it was my choice in the process, but I thought there's something more going on with life. And I had this, and I was always pretty in tune with my gut sort of feeling.
Yeah.
And, you know, when the redundancy came about, I remember saying to an old boss, not a boss from that company, but from a previous company, we were chatting, and I said to him, I don't know what I'm going to do. I just know I'm going to do something completely different. And he said, yeah, I've sort of got that feeling too. And that's when I became a life coach. So through that process, I started to like look at my life, like really deep dive into my life. And it's sort of like, you know, when you compare the 4 seasons of a year, you know, like summer is where, spring is where you do all the planting, and then summer is where you do the watering and the growing, and then the fruit is born in the autumn, and then you contemplate and revisit everything in the winter. So it was sort of like I was in the winter of my life, you know, looking back at my career and just looking at me, where I was actually going, I'm not living like the life that I love. I'm seriously not. You know, I was spending 95% of my time in my corporate career. My relationships were okay, not great. I certainly wasn't looking after myself mentally, physically, emotionally, or spiritually for that matter. So with the deep dive into me, I became a life coach. And I thought, you know what, because I was in my early 50s and I was around 54, 55. And I had this great realization, which I'm sure you relate to, Sue, what you're doing. And the realization was that I am the only person that I am going to spend my entire life with. So why am I putting myself last, giving up on my dreams, and sort of just there for everyone else, but not for myself? And I don't know, I was like, my God, why hadn't I realized this like when I was younger? Like, and I don't know, since I've been like on this path for the last, I guess, really, you know, 7, 8 years, I really have realized that most people don't realize that.
No.
We're too busy looking after, especially women, we're looking after everyone else, nurturing everyone else, and we've forgotten about ourselves. And we've also forgotten about the fact that when I look after me, I can be there for everyone else because I'm not depleted. You know, I can be there and I can do more things and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So live, love. Yeah, go on.
I was just going to say that when we do stop and think about looking after ourselves and nurturing ourselves, we are just going to be so much better as a person, and our relationships are going to be so much better because we will be able to give, but from a different place.
Exactly. And that's why I called my business Live Love by Design, because I thought most people don't sit back and design a life that they're living and they're loving in all areas of their lives. And in my Live Love by Design model, I have 9 areas of life. And I started to realize how I was ignoring a lot of them. And, you know, you can create balance as long as you focus on every single area of your life.
Yeah.
So that's what Live Love by Design came about. Now, how Dan came about as the co-founder the reason why Dan is a co-founder, and it's not just as a beautiful remembrance to him, it's because he's in my head. Like, seriously, sir, he's constantly in my head. He's constantly feeding me all of these ideas. My first 2 books I wrote in 13 weeks because he was in my head, downloading, giving me all of the information, giving me the chapters. Sure, I had to do the work and put it together, but he was the one that constantly feeds me with these ideas. And that's why he's the co-founder, because he's working at it, but just on the other side, drip feeding me as we go along. Does that make sense?
Certainly does. And it's so lovely that, you know, you can still have him in your life. We never forget about our loved ones, but they do sometimes fade out of our everyday life when it gets so busy. But he's front and centre because he's part of the business as well. So I think it's a great idea. Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, and he is. He's constantly showing me signs that he's here, he's traveling with us. Even like, and you have to love the modern day, you know, iPhones and stuff like that. He will show up in family photos all the time. And because we can deep dive into the photos and not just like a still photo, a picture we used to get years ago, we can deep dive into him and we can clearly see him in the photos, which I just love. So I'm constantly looking for him. You know, like his twin brother got married a couple of years ago. We deep dived into that. Not only did he show up in the photo, but so did my dad. So I was like, okay, they're all there.
Yeah. Well, that's lovely. And he would be keeping you motivated and inspired to just continue the journey on this new path. And if you'd still been doing your corporate life, you would not be having that same relationship with him that you have now. And I just think that that's lovely.
You're absolutely 100%. And to be quite honest, I don't even think I'd be as healthy as what I am if I was still in my corporate life. No. And I had this feeling that if I hadn't woken up after redundancy, I would have got something else. And who knows, it could have been sickness. It could have been any of the many loss events. But I just knew, and I had this great belief, and I've always been spiritual even before Dan passed, but I've become more so since his passing. I just have this sort of belief that we sort of planned it, you know, so that I would wake up, so that then I would do what I'm doing now to help other people to realise that you don't have to grieve and suffer and give up on your life. Like, I've met so many people through, and it's not just death, you know, through losing a job or from losing their marriage, that they stop living. And they just sort of put the rest of their life on hold. And that's not what life's about.
No. And I suppose, though, sometimes when you lose a loved one, guilt comes in. Why wasn't it me? Or I shouldn't be living my life because I've got to be grieving, and I don't want to be happy because that's not fair. They're not here. So I think that all comes into play. Now, the other thing that you just talked about was the loss of a job, and usually we assume that loss is mainly to do with death, losing a loved one. But we've had a chat before about this, and you suggested that there's many kinds of loss. So would you like to elaborate on that for us?
Yeah. Well, so what I'll do is I'll share my screen, because I've got a list here of over 40 different loss events that can affect all of our lives. So when you have a look at this list, you can, you know, sure, there's a whole lot of death of different sorts of loved ones, but, you know, death of your pet. You know, so many people forget that your pet is a huge part of your family. Your pet is probably the only relationship you have that is an unconditional love relationship. So it is drastic when you lose that. So losing your job, you know, you look at the recent pandemic that we're in now. You know, we have so many of the minor ones come into the forefront. Loss of, change in work conditions, change of status, change change in recreational activities, change in work conditions. There's so many, different things that can affect our lives. And a lot of the times we say, oh, that's change. And I'm going, yeah, but change is a part of life. And when you are going from what you class as normal into a new scenario, there probably will be a grieving situation. So it's about you honouring the fact of the way that you're feeling is justified. And so many people, because they don't understand this, they'll say things to you like, what's wrong with you? Get over it. That's just a part of life. But for us to understand, it is a part of life. And maybe it's like a pivotal moment in your life for you to say, okay, maybe I got a little bit off course, or maybe it's time for me to change direction and to create a new normal or a new way of living and loving your life. And when you look at it as that, you can go, oh, wow, that's really a better way to look at it. And because of the process that I teach everyone, you then can go through the process and create a healthy emotional relationship moving forward in regards to whatever that loss event was, so that you don't have to grieve and suffer.
I notice, if I can just cut in a little bit there, I notice that you've got Christmas and holidays in there. Would that be, for example, a family breakdown, and then of course, and I've been through that myself, where do the kids go for Christmas lunch and then dinner and all that sort of thing? Is that what you're talking about?
It can be that, or it can be, Christmas isn't fun when you've got an empty chair at the table for whatever reason. Or Christmas for some people can be quite sad because they don't have a family. They are by themselves. And, you think about so many people, as I said, there's 9 areas of life. So many people, they will, like I was doing, totally focus on their career, and they get to the top of the ladder. But then when they look around, they go, oh my God, I'm here by myself. I've burnt my relationships along the way. So that's why these can be really sad times for people.
Yes. And I noticed there too on the list, loss of approval. I wouldn't have thought about that, actually. Would you like to elaborate a bit on that for me?
Yeah, sure. Well, when you think about it, so many times we seek other people's approval for whatever we're doing or for what we're not doing. And, it's ideal not to actually ever get to that stage and to be able to know where you are. But so many people, once they've lost that approval for whatever reason, they find it hard to move on and create a life. So they maybe stop achieving, stop trying.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And I mean, some of them are pretty obvious, but others on the list definitely you would just brush over, as you say. People would just say, well, look, that's life, get on with it, let's move on.
Like having a child. As people say, oh, that's a joyous occasion. What have you got to grieve about? Well, if it's your first child, it's your past life, where you were single and where you weren't responsible for another human being to that degree. But it's about honouring the fact that you are moving on and completing that past relationship, so that when you do move forward, you're in a great space and you understand that this is just another phase of life.
Yes, yeah. I mentioned in your bio you conduct beyond loss retreats, and you have programs. So how do they work? They're virtual and they're also physical, I believe.
Yes, they are. Well, before this pandemic, I had it all planned, booked, ready to go to do a physical retreat. And of course, we all went into lockdown, so it couldn't happen. And then I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? So I took it all online, and I have to say, I'm so grateful because it's bigger and better. Obviously I do it through videos. So there's 3 pathways you can do it. So you can do it by yourself. which is over 9 weeks. There's 36 videos which are drip fed to you, or you can do it in a group where you still do the 9 weeks, but we have weekly catch-ups to discuss the material, or you can do it one-to-one with me. So now I've opened it up to the world, not just to my local community or people flying into the local community, which I just love. And because we have videos as well as live sort of scenarios during whichever pathway you choose to take, we can expand so much more than having the limited time of 3 days.
Yeah.
So most of the, you have a fair bit of work to do each week, but it just takes you from where you are possibly grieving and suffering on a journey of understanding loss, understanding that we've never really been taught how to move beyond loss, how for centuries and centuries and centuries we've, said these cliches and we've acted this way and we've avoided, which creates the grieving and suffering. Whereas it's now, when we don't do it that way, we can do it this way. And when we understand, I'll say very quickly, so in every relationship, there's 3 components or 3 aspects to it. So there's a physical aspect, which is the way we hang out together, the things we do, the things we say, the things the way we touch each other. Then the second aspect is the emotional component. And that's is all encompassing of all of our feelings for each other, the good, the bad, the glad, and the sad. And then there's the spiritual component, which is the intangible. We know we're connected. We're not 100% sure why we're so connected, but we know from the moment we met, we were connected. So when the loss event occurs, it's the physical relationship that ends, okay? So, but the emotional and the spiritual live on forever. But it's the emotional relationship that causes us all the grieving and suffering. So through the programs, we work out all of the emotional stuff that is causing us to grieve and suffer, so that we can have a healthy emotional relationship moving forward. Whether the person's in this realm or in another, we can still have a healthy relationship in regards to them. Yes. And that's all I do.
Yeah. Well, I was saying also in the introduction about loss and with COVID-19, one of the things was our loss of freedom to be able to socially connect physically. We were locked at home and that sort of thing. And the point I'm trying to make is that even though we lost that, people worked around it. They started doing their communicating online. We had Zoom and Skype and FaceTime and other sorts of portals that we can use. And you've done the same as a lot of businesses have. They've not said, oh, well, I'm not doing this anymore. I've lost that ability to do it this way. They've worked around it like you have. And I actually did that myself because I was doing I've just finished earlier this year my group fitness instructor certification, and I only had a couple of thank you, even though they told me I was too old when I first went to do it. Anyway,
good on you for not listening.
No, I didn't. I kept going, but anyway, they said I only had a couple of physical classes to take, and they were group classes, and they said, oh, well, you'll have to wait 6 months at least because you can't do them. And I thought about it and I thought, well, I've got 3 classes to give. I've only got to get through those and I've finished, and I'm not going to wait 6 months to do that. So I put it to them that I would do a Zoom session using Zoom for the meeting. I would have all my participants. I would have the PT who had to observe me, observe the class. I would record it and send it to the assessor. And when I put it to them, they said, oh, okay, no one else has come up with that idea, but that's fine. So I was able to say, well, I've lost that ability to be able to take those classes physically at the gym, but I'm not going to let that stop me from moving forward. And I think that's the point you're making too, that with, you know, loss in life, we don't have to accept it as being the end. It's a way, we have to work out a way around it.
And there is always another way. Like, we live in a universe with infinite possibilities. And so many times we limit ourselves by going, this is the one and only way. And it's like, no, it's not. Like, your way may be different to my way. And we can, you know, it's just about of us all saying, well, how can I do this? And that's exactly what you did. And it's exactly what I did. And one thing I noticed, Sue, is it's quite interesting that the pandemic hit like now. Imagine if it had hit 10 years ago.
Oh,
we all wouldn't have so easily been able to go online.
No.
You know, Zoom wasn't around 10 years ago. All these sort of things. It just always seems to happen at a time where we can all go, okay, how can I move on? And how can we not be as affected by it? You know, we could have easily gone into fear. We could have easily, as you said, just gone, oh, well, I can't do that now. I've got to have to wait 6 months till it's over. But no, we live in a world where we can, all we're going to ask is how.
Yeah.
How can we do this?
That's right. And do you think, though, also that you might have felt this too, that perhaps people said to you, oh, you know, you're not doing the right thing, you're moving on, you're forgetting about Dan, or which you didn't, you took him with you in the business. But do you think sometimes people worry too much about what other people are saying and putting their opinions to the way you should be behaving, rather than just saying, well, listen, I have to look at my life because, you know, that's the longest person I'm going to know for the rest of my life, as you said at the beginning. That was a paraphrase. But, so do you think that's an issue that people have to...
It can be. Most I get, I call my process, my 5-step process, the gift of loss. Okay? That's what most people say, Karen, how can you call Dan dying a gift of loss? And I'm saying, I don't call Dan dying a gift of loss. I call the process and who you become after that loss the gift.
Yeah.
If you choose to unwrap it. So many people choose to stay stuck where they are and they don't see or unwrap the gift of what has happened. Now, I am a more loving person, a healthier person. Like, who would have thought I would be an author? You know, I've written 4 paperback books, numerous ebooks, 4 gratitude journals. Like, there's no way I was going to do that as an accountant, you know, because I was totally focused on my job. So I am a more worldly person, a more spiritual person. I'm a better partner. I'm a better friend. I'm a better mother. All of these things from who I have become after Dan's passing. And that's the gift. And that's why I call my business Live, Love by Design, because you can become and design your life so that you are living and loving it each and every day.
Yeah, and you talked about new paths that you've taken and things that you've done being an author that you would never have done in your previous roles. But what about being an international speaker?
Yeah, exactly. Which just came about.
Yeah.
I've shared the stage with Marianne Williamson, Valerie Harper, Jamie Lee Curtis. I have a photo with Jamie Lee Curtis. I have to say, she is the most amazing and friendly, down-to-earth woman you will ever meet. And that all came about because I did a program not long after I left. I did my life coaching with a group called Braveheart Women. And Dr. Ellie Drake is the founder of Braveheart. I'm not even sure it's still around now. But she, every year, would have a 4-day conference in LA. And I went to the first conference, and on the second conference I went to a year later, I was on stage. And she had these amazing people, and I had 15 minutes on stage. And so, you know, that was just the most amazing gift. And I had a standing ovation just through telling my story.
Yeah. Well,
Which
it
was
is
amazing.
but as I said at the beginning, it's very powerful, and the way you
I
present it is very powerful and emotive, and I can feel that passion in you. You know, where you do want to have a legacy for Dan and carry that forward.
Yes.
So
Thank you.
we've talked about COVID and generally about loss and that. So if listeners have a particular problem that they've got now, what are some, just a couple of coping strategies that they could put in place today just to help them until they can perhaps reach out to someone like yourself or, you know, for help?
Well, my first advice would be my first step of my 5-step process, and that is to stop. Most people don't stop. We've been told for centuries and centuries and centuries, just keep busy, just keep going, and I did all of that, and it doesn't work.
No.
But it's in the stopping that we get to take that conscious loving breath, and we get to sort of bring in all of our power, our wisdom, and our love into our body so that we can clearly look at what has happened and figure out what it means for us now and moving forward. And that's how we accept. You know, the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, 5 stages of grief, she did the most amazing research because she researched exactly how people were coping with loss. And they're in and out of all of these 5 stages, and it takes them to go in and out of them in no particular order until they get to acceptance. When you stop, you can go to acceptance really quickly. But the key is to stop. And, as I said, I didn't stop. I kept going. I was in avoidance. And when we're in avoidance, we start to use all of these unhealthy coping mechanisms, which should probably be called non-coping mechanisms. Food, alcohol, drugs. We'll work too much. We'll shop too much. It's called retail therapy.
Yeah.
It's not therapy, especially when you get your credit card statement the next month. So it is about the stopping. So my best advice for people is to stop and just look at what's happened, figure it out, figure out what it means for you now and what it means for you moving forward. Because once you do that, you start to bring in, as I said, your power, your love, and your wisdom. And they're the 3 things that are in your body that will help you to understand what is the best way forward for me and my family now. Especially with job loss.
Yes, yeah. And I would like to probably add here that if people, if listeners are going through a loss and they're grieving and they really, just cannot cope, there is always help. There's Lifeline, Beyond Blue, many organisations in Australia and worldwide, wherever you are, there is always someone there that will listen, and you need to be able to feel that you can reach out if it becomes to that level.
Very true, Sue.
Yeah. So I just wanted to put that in. Now, just before I get to my final question, I do want to, how can listeners get in touch with you and find out more about what you're offering?
Yep, thank you. Well, I have 2 websites, KarenChaston.com or livelovebydesign.com. So you can go to either of them. I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn, you can reach out. I'm holding, a lot of webinars. There is a Life After Loss that you can download ebook on my website, which is, a great ebook. It explains in more detail what we've been talking about now and how you can, or you can just email me, Karen@KarenChaston.com.au. So my email has a .au on it, whereas my websites don't. They're just .com.
Yeah. And of course, I'll put all of those links in the show's comments, but You've
Oh, thank
also
you.
mentioned that you've got journals, and there's one, you've got a set of journals, haven't you? Would you like to
Yeah,
just tell me a little bit about those, because
I
they
should
look
have brought
great
them up.
actually.
So,
Okay.
so how they came about, Sue, was probably about a year after Dan passed. After I left my corporate job, someone suggested to me, "Why don't you start writing in a gratitude journal? Just write down, 3 to 5 things a day what you're grateful for. Make it different every day." And I did that for a while, but then I noticed that the journal is really pretty on the outside, and on the inside, it's just plain paper. So I believe Dan convinced me that I needed to create my own set of gratitude journals, and I call them the Elements Collection Gratitude Journals. So they are water, air, fire, and earth. And they are 99 unique days where I have the chakra color on the day number. I have a unique photo. I took all of the photos except for fire, because I figured if I was taking all these fire photos, they might think I'm an arsonist or something. And then a unique saying underneath, and then a blank on the right page. It's just a blank where you can say. So I deep dive into it. It's amazing. I think the water was my first one because I had 99 photos of water, because at that time I lived in Sydney on the northern beaches just near Narrabeen Beach. So I always had water photos. And then my last one was earth, and my girlfriend and I flew to Uluru, because when I thought, what's earth? We flew to Uluru and took, so have you been to Uluru?
No, and it's on my bucket list to go. So
I have to say, I feel, and I was, in my 50s when we went there, and it's such an amazing spiritual place.
yes.
And because they have men's business and women's business, and they can't see each other, I had to get every photo in that journal approved. We took over 1,000 photos. I needed 99, and I was starting to think I wasn't going to have enough photos. Because they would say, no, you can't have that photo, you can't have that photo. And I firmly believe that every Anglo-Saxon Australian should go there before they're 21, because it really helps you not only to connect more to our country, our earth, but it helps us to understand our Indigenous people, and the way that they really look after our land and understand it. The stories that they share with you as you walk around the rock, not on the rock, around the rock. It's absolutely beautiful. So yeah, and that's what I'm saying. I love all of my journals. They are really great, and it is a practice that I love to do each day.
Yes, journaling can be can help the process as well, can't it? But
it does.
With the
certainly does help.
Yeah, with the journals, are they on your website, or if people wanted
yeah,
to get them?
I'm pretty sure they are. I've changed it a little bit lately. Yeah, email me and you can get them.
Yeah, because I had a look at them, and they do look. I'm someone that loves a lovely book, but then I won't write it, and I'll get a journal, but then of course I won't write in it for a little while, because I think my writing's not very nice now, and I'm going to spoil the book. But you've got to get past that and use them.
It's a book to be written in. That's what it's called.
That's right. Yeah. So before we go today, I want to ask you a question that I ask all my guests, and that question is, what does being a woman living well mean to you?
Oh, I love that question. It's fantastic.
Well, it does open up a whole range of answers, and so far I haven't had one the same. So
I bet you haven't. And I bet you've never had this one before either.
Okay.
So I like to tell people, suggest to people, that when you're living and loving your life, you will wake up each and every morning and you will look in the mirror and you'll give yourself the old Fonzie salute. Remember it?
Oh, yeah.
Hey! So that's what living life really well means to me. And in order to be able to do that, it is that you are living and loving in all 9 areas of your life. You are thriving. And you understand how they all come together, and when one's balanced, the other's balanced, and if one's a little lopsided, you've got to bring the other one in. That is what living and loving and living well means to me.
Yes, that's right. And I usually say it's sort of a bit like the wheel of life, and it's a bit like having you know, if the wheels on the car are unbalanced, the car isn't going to run smoothly, is it? So you need to.
That's exactly right.
And you need to revisit those areas of your life, I think, regularly, because life does take over, and you know, something will get out of balance and need your attention. But you know, I'm reluctant to go today. I've really enjoyed chatting with you, and I'm hoping that you will, you know, come back again, because there's so much that we can talk and introduce the listeners to. And you know, if we can help just one person out there that, you know, should cope with any loss that they have, or life in general, well then I think that makes us feel so good, and we've done our job. And you've got Dan sitting on your shoulder saying, well done, Mum, we're doing a good job. So yeah, so
thank you. And I'd love to come back, Sue, anytime.
Yes, well, I'll be talking to you about that when we finish, so don't you worry. So for those of you that are listening, as we mentioned before, Karen, I'll be putting Karen's contact details in the comments section. And if you've enjoyed the podcast today, please leave a review. But also, if you have someone who is going through a loss and would benefit from listening to the conversation, please share it with them. Remember Lifeline, or reaching out if you need to. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so that you never miss a conversation. Thank you, Karen, so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Sue. I've really enjoyed chatting with you today.
Me too. And for everyone else, don't forget to embrace life and to live life every day. And I'll see you at the next conversation. Bye for now.